The Golden State Killer, also known as the East Area Rapist, was a serial rapist and murderer who terrorized California for over a decade, leaving a trail of devastation and trauma in his wake. The case was one of the most infamous and complex in American true crime history, with the killer evading capture for decades despite leaving behind a wealth of evidence. The first reported attack occurred in June 1976 in Sacramento, California. A young couple was awoken in their home by an intruder who broke into their house through an open window. The attacker tied up the man and raped the woman, threatening to kill them both if they didn't comply. Over the next few years, the Golden State Killer, as he came to be known, committed dozens of similar attacks across multiple counties in California. The killer's modus operandi, MO, was to target couples in their homes, often breaking in through an open window or door. He would tie up the man and then assault the woman, sometimes raping her multiple times. He would often speak to his victims, making strange comments and threats, and would sometimes take small items from the home as trophies. The Golden State Killer's attacks were characterized by a level of meticulous planning and control. He would often scope out his targets in advance, watching them from afar and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He was also known to be highly calculating and manipulative, using his words to intimidate and dominate his victims. The case was investigated by multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Sacramento Police Department and the California Department of Justice. However, despite collecting evidence and following up on leads, the killer remained at large. One of the most significant challenges in the case was the lack of consistency in the MO. The Golden State Killer's attacks varied in terms of the level of violence and the specific actions he took. This made it difficult for investigators to identify a clear pattern or signature. In addition to the rapes, the Golden State Killer was also linked to a series of murders that took place in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The victims were often couples who were attacked in their homes, with the male partner being killed and the female partner being raped and sometimes killed as well. The case drew widespread media attention, with the Golden State Killer becoming a household name. The attacks were so brazen and the killer's behavior so bizarre that many believed he was a monster, a superhuman figure who was able to evade capture. In the 1980s, the case went cold, and many believed that the Golden State Killer had either died or moved away from California. However, in 2001, a new task force was formed to re-examine the case using DNA evidence. The DNA evidence had been collected from the crime scenes, but at the time, it was not advanced enough to be used to identify a suspect. However, with advances in DNA technology, investigators were able to create a DNA profile of the killer. In 2018, investigators used a new technique called genetic genealogy to identify a suspect. They uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy website, GeneMatch, and were able to identify a number of distant relatives. By analyzing the family trees of these relatives, investigators were able to narrow down the list of potential suspects. They eventually identified a man named Joseph James DeAngelo as the prime suspect. DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer, was arrested on April 24, 2018. He was subsequently charged with multiple counts of murder, rape, and burglary. The arrest of DeAngelo was a major breakthrough in the case, and it brought closure to the many victims and families who had been affected by the Golden State Killer's crimes. DeAngelo's motivations for the crimes are still not fully understood, but it is believed that he was driven by a desire for control and power. He was known to have been a quiet and unassuming man, and his ability to lead a double life for so long was likely due to his ability to manipulate those around him. The Golden State Killer case is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist in human nature. The attacks were brutal and senseless, and the impact on the victims and their families was devastating. The case also highlights the importance of DNA evidence and genetic genealogy in solving crimes. The use of these techniques was instrumental in identifying DeAngelo and bringing him to justice. In June 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and numerous other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Golden State Killer case is a complex and disturbing one, and it raises many questions about the nature of evil and the human psyche. It is a reminder that even in the most seemingly ordinary communities, there can be individuals who are capable of unspeakable acts of violence and terror. The Golden State Killer, a chilling case, continued. The impact on victims and families. The Golden State Killer's attacks had a profound impact on his victims and their families. Many of the victims suffered from PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and some were forced to rebuild their lives from scratch. The trauma and fear instilled by the killer's actions lingered for decades, affecting not only the direct victims but also their loved ones. The investigation. The investigation into the Golden State Killer's crimes was one of the largest and most complex in California history. Hundreds of law enforcement officers and detectives worked tirelessly to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and track down leads. Despite the challenges, investigators remained determined to bring the killer to justice. The role of DNA evidence. DNA evidence played a crucial role in the Golden State Killer case. In the early days of DNA testing, investigators collected DNA samples from crime scenes, but they were unable to match them to a suspect. Years later, advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to create a DNA profile of the killer. In 2018, investigators used genetic genealogy to identify a suspect. They uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy website, GeneMatch, and were able to identify a number of distant relatives. By analyzing the family trees of these relatives, investigators were able to narrow down the list of potential suspects and ultimately identify Joseph James DeAngelo. The arrest and trial. On April 24, 2018, investigators arrested Joseph James DeAngelo at his home in Citrus Heights, California. DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer, was charged with multiple counts of murder, rape, and burglary. During the trial, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence linking DeAngelo to the crimes, including DNA evidence, witness testimony, and physical evidence. DeAngelo's defense team attempted to argue that the DNA evidence was contaminated, but the prosecution's experts testified that the DNA match was conclusive. On June 29, 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and numerous other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The legacy of the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer case is a dark chapter in California's history, and it serves as a reminder of the importance of justice and accountability. The case also highlights the impact of trauma on victims and their families and the need for support and resources to help them heal. The Golden State Killer's crimes were brutal and senseless, and his ability to evade capture for so long was a testament to his cunning and planning. However, in the end, justice was served, and DeAngelo was held accountable for his horrific crimes. The case will continue to be studied by law enforcement and criminologists, and it will serve as a reminder of the importance of perseverance and determination in solving complex crimes. Victim impact statements. Many of the victims and their families provided impact statements during the trial, detailing the lasting effects of the Golden State Killer's crimes. These statements provided a powerful reminder of the human cost of DeAngelo's actions. One victim,